jargon and different acronyms can mean different things to different teams on the same floor, right? So how do you pare these things down? There's another problem. You don't have a lot of time. So how do you take these concepts, these customer-focused or employee-focused, interesting concepts that you like to relate, when you don't have any time to boil them down into a pretty story that you know can be repeated and remembered? And then sometimes there's crisis, and then all rules just fall away. So how do you get the message out in the way that you want to? There's one thing that a lot of companies don't have that could help them, and I was heartened to see that you are working on it. And that's some sort of baseline. It's a foundation. These into your messages. You're in a really great place that people will understand the meaning behind what you're saying, the intent behind what you're saying. They'll be able to grasp it quickly and do something with it, and they'll believe you every time you open your mouth or that they see an email from you. So today in these 2 hours, we're going to be working very quickly to just give you 1 or 2 instantly accessible tools and some things to think about before you start entering into the next conversations that you have or the next emails that you write. One of the things I want you to keep in mind is that it's tricky. When you are working, already honest, clear, and relatable, and they're all working fine, but then one of them goes wrong. You realize as you're speaking that maybe you didn't put enough time into clear and people's eyes are glazing over. The other plates will start to wobble. You might have your caring, your clear, and your relatable, and they're all spinning fine, but if you aren't honest, all of those plates are going to united voice. You have 2 minutes to do it, and we'll talk about why those 2 minutes are important in a moment. You don't have to take them all, so here's what I ask. When you, as a couple, when the first person is done, and you've turned off the camera, just one of you raise your hand a little bit so I can see that.
Honest, caring, clear, relatable.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh no.
No,
I thought that was not
no,
fair.
everything
Oh
else.
man. I got it.
So Maria's going to videotape you, and you're going to tell her what United Voice means to you. When you're done, then clear and in this building, with doing a media training, and we show this video, and someone who is a United employee says, "Is there any chance we could put a cat in the aisle and resuscitate it?" Because it works. There are some really neat things about that second clip that were not present in the first one. One, it was authentic. He looked the part, he sounded the part, you believed him. And if you hear one thing from me today, and only one thing, it's this: authenticity beats polish every time. You never have to be perfect. Employees here don't expect you to be perfect. Your customers don't expect you to be perfect. If you are authentic, they'll forgive you a lot of things. They'll see that you're human, even when they're mad at you. You have a little bit more leeway there. That's one of the most important things. The other thing that you can just flat steal from that last one, when he says, "It was my GoPro trip to the park, it was my GoPro trip to the ski area," you can take that. What does it mean to you? It's the gate agent who is so clear when there's a delay that people feel good that they're getting the right information. It's making sure that our team is hearing that we care about how hard we've been working them. You can bring these things to life with simple examples rather than saying what it is as a mission statement. What do these 4 words mean by example? The more clear your example, the more people are going to repeat it and remember it and grab the essence of what it is you're trying to say. So there are a lot of aspects of communication when you can see and hear somebody.
Right. Would be secondary for me.
Vocal and verbal.
Yeah, would be the most important. The tone, the words, that to me drives the authenticity versus the how you look, the visual.
Right.
I like that. I
You don't have any of that.
Right.
You don't know what the
You-
tone
you're-
is,
the first two.
or you do.
You don't have the
You
first
lose the
two,
first
you
two.
don't have the first two, these phone interviews, right, they're useless for me. I mean, it's,
Even a phone interview.
yeah, if you don't have all three,
It's harder?
It's subpar, it's subpar.
So this does not mean that content isn't important. It does not mean content isn't important.
Pretty close.
It means you won. It means
So we use the content and, yeah, interesting.
right. I work with a lot of technology companies, and they'll take me on this.
I'm sure.
Unfortunately, it wasn't my research, so I can push back on them. No, it does not mean content isn't important at all. It means if you don't look like you care and you don't sound like you care, I don't care either. If you look engaged and sound engaged, I might not even understand what you're saying, but boy, you're engaged, I'm gonna connect. I will connect with that. There are people in my line of work who will tell you openly, it doesn't matter what you say, just focus on how you look and how you sound. I don't believe that for 1 second. I really don't. I think content is king. You have to get the content down, you have to get your story down, and then decide how you want to verbalize it or write it. You can never get your story down by starting with a PowerPoint deck. So how often do you look at the 67-page PowerPoint deck and say, oh, I think I know how I'm going to talk to it? You're talking to the deck, you're not talking to the people in the audience. You want to know what story you want to tell before you ever look at a slide. What am I trying to communicate to these people? Then I can go find some slides that go with it. Once you've done that, there are a few things that just work for you. I still say the visual and the vocal are critically important if you're going to talk in front of people. That's super important. And it's so much easier to look authentic if you know what story you're trying to tell. If you plan the story you're trying to tell, looking and sounding like you're with that story is second nature. You don't have to worry about it because you know what story you're trying to tell. So this first part of what we're talking about will assume that you're speaking it, whether it's on the phone, in front of a large number of people. When I talk about presentations, what I'm really talking about is important conversations. Because a presentation can be one-to-many, it can be one to a conference room, it can be one-to-one important stakeholder. It's all the same thing. Get your story down before you do anything else. This is a communication template that I think works really well, whether you have 2 weeks, 2 days, or 2 hours to put together the contents of an important conversation. And you see at the top, I have 2 blocks here, and they're actually interchangeable. I'll explain that in a moment. But this second line is the most important thing of any conversation that you have. What is the one thing you want the audience to do, think, or feel? So what you want them to do. I want you to give my team $10,000 for an offsite. What I want you to think. I want you to think that our team is coming up with really innovative ideas that are going to move the business forward. Inspired. I want you to feel inspired that even though we missed our numbers, we have the team together to move forward. They're separate, and they each need some thought. You can have a large presentation where all 3 of those make their way in. If you can get totally clear on what's the one thing you want the audience to do, think, or feel, the data starts to take care of itself. You'll look at those 67 PowerPoint slides, and you'll think, these are all good slides, but they don't all have to do with that one thing. You could start to edit them out to be more clear, to be more relatable, to be more focused on what the audience wants. And then, if you were dead clear on what you want at the top, you've also now written the end of your conversation. So before I leave you, here's the one thing I want you to do, think, because it's my fantasy. So we're in London, and they dropped us into the middle of the West End, and there's a signpost that says the river is this way, the palace is that way, the Big Ben is over here. Those are signposts. Tell us where to go. Sometimes they tell us how far or how long it's going to take us to get there. Verbal signposts are so effective if what you're trying to do is get to the clear, relatable part of your conversation. So imagine that you have the opportunity to say, in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to give you 2 tools that are going to support you in this conversation. They think, whew, it's 5 minutes, that's good. You can have 2 or 3 things. You might say that as you're talking about the United Voice to your teams. In this case, you have to go to 4, don't you? There are 4 really important things to always check, and you click them off, the 4. People will understand and write down those 4 things. If it's an email, and every time you're talking about clear, honest, relatable, caring, they see those in bullet points, you're in a good spot, and you're reinforcing what you said and what you're writing. So content is important. How you organize it is important. 2 girls. Does one of them get in more trouble than the other?
Yes.
Okay, I'm guessing it's a 16-year-old?
Yeah, well.
Sisters.
Yes.
What's her name?
Molly.
Molly. So I love to use children as an example because we all either have one or were one, so you remember, right? So she's 16 years old, Molly. She's gotten into some trouble at school. Nobody's been hurt, but you got the call, right?
That is true.
That is true. There's always one. There's always one. So, Molly got the call. She's going to go home tonight. No, Krista got the call. She's going to go home tonight to Molly, who knows that Krista knows. You know she knows, you know.
She knows, I know, yes.
And Krista's going to focus on one thing without even being aware of it. She's going to be focusing on her tone. We all do this as parents because it can go a couple of different ways. So let's split tone into 2 very, I think, robust buckets. One would be this one, enthusiasm, passion. That can go on a negative side too, that enthusiasm. But there's enthusiastic, passionate, that's a tone. There's another one. It's responsibility and empathy. If you're an airline, you have both of these. You have new products, new services, new routes, it's great. You also have delayed flights, you have things that go wrong. Any number of things that can happen here, you want to slip it over to the responsible and empathetic side. So we go back to Molly. She's going to know, Krista, which tone you chose before you open your mouth. She's probably going to know which tone she chose before she opens the door. Because when you effectively choose your tone, how do I want to sound to this other person? Everything else follows. And you may have chosen the responsible and empathetic because of all the mischief that Molly can get into. This one's just a learning experience. And she'll see that in you, that moment. That's it's pretty fresh, isn't it? Chosen a tone. And you decide to communicate with that tone. It will change the way people perceive you on the other end of the phone. I always encourage people for important conversations on the phone to stand up. It opens your core and you breathe better. Your energy will be higher. One of my favorite little pieces of research that I found came from the Nordstrom company. You have Nordstrom here in Chicago, yes, don't you? So I love this. It's their customer service center, which is mostly fronted by women because it's mostly women who call Nordstrom, and their customer service is fantastic. They all have mirrors up in front of their stalls, their cubicles, not just to remind them to smile. Most sales organizations have that, and they have the mirror to remind people to smile. But they do it because they found in research that when a human being is looking at another human being in the eye, it changes the way you communicate, even if that other human being is you looking in a mirror. It warms you. It brings that caring piece into it. It allows you to know that the look on storytelling piece is super important. It's hard for people to understand the story you're trying to tell if you don't have detail. When you talk about future tense, and we want to take these concepts and have people understand what they mean, you gotta give them some detail about what it means. And the more detail that you can give, the more examples of what I mean by that is, the closer you're going to get to having people understand what it is you're trying to say. There was a young woman at Stanford who was finishing her PhD, communications and psychology, and she had a hunch. So she gave a presentation to a room of about 25 people. And in this presentation, she had 3 stories interspersed with a lot of data. And she had brain probes on. And everyone in the audience did too. So she starts her presentation with a story, and her brain waves are doing this. And then pretty soon, very quickly, the others were also going like this, meeting her brain waves. And then she went into data, and off they went. She gets midpoint, she brings in another story, and now they're back. Off for the data and back for the story. A cognitive mind meld. When your brain waves are doing the same thing as the person who's speaking to you, you can't forget that. You didn't know what was happening in your brain waves. You just know that you connected with them in a way that you can't connect to data. Bring yourself into the conversation. Talk about what it means to you before you ask them to have it mean something to them. And use colorful language. Anytime.
People who either have achieved or are on their way to achieving remarkable levels of success. I would offer this reminder. Don't wait. Don't wait until you make your first million to make a difference in somebody's life. If you have something to give it now. Serve food in a soup kitchen, clean up a neighborhood park, be a mentor. Not every day is going to offer us a chance to save somebody's life, but every day offers us an opportunity to affect one. So get in the game. Save the shoes. Thank you.
So let me ask you, what did that woman look like? Paint a picture of her. There's a thing that the executives, do you know what that might mean?
Too long didn't read.
Too long, didn't read. They do it all the time. That importance of putting the most important thing first is critical in an email. They aren't going to hear if you're honest or caring or nothing if they aren't clear about why they need to open this email. So, being clear, super important in writing. Part of my job is I get to scan the web looking for terrible examples of corporate violators. This is one of my favorite. This is a public-facing mission statement. They mean for people in the outside world to read this. Their mission statement: to reach the largest daily audience in the world by connecting everyone to their world via our information sharing and distribution platform products, and be one of the top revenue generating internet companies in the world. They left out all those comments. That's why you have to read it through that way. You know who this company is. Any guesses? Far too early, several years ago. But here's the story. She talks about the day she became a writer and knew she was a writer. Was the first day of high school at Beverly Hills High School. Her parents just moved her there. She was miserable, but she liked to write, so she took a journalism class. And the journalism teacher gave the kids a first day of school assignment. He gave them a whole bunch of facts and told them to write the lead paragraph and the headline for what would be in the student newspaper. So they had the audience, and the facts were things like the principal and the school superintendent and a noted anthropologist were all going up to the capital of Sacramento to talk about new curriculum. Those were all the facts, just listed. So the kids got on their assignment, and at the end, the professor stood up at the front of the class with a waste paper basket. And as the kids came up with their finished product, their paragraph and lead, into the waste paper basket it went. Which, by the way, is what happens to most of United's press releases in newsrooms. It's every company's press releases go into the waste because they don't say much of anything. Anyway, so the professor is throwing, the teacher's throwing all these in the waste basket until Nora's came up. When Nora's came up to the front of the room, he puts it to one side. She didn't know why. We get to the end, and almost all of the kids said, on Thursday, our principal and this anthropologist and the superintendent are going to talk about the curriculum in Sacramento. They had all the facts, there was nothing wrong with that. That wasn't what Nora wrote. Nora's lead, there's no school on Thursday. She knew who her audience was, and getting to something as stark as there's no school on Thursday is the hardest thing a writer can do. You have all these facts that you want to put in your email, but what do you want them to do? What's the thing that's going to inspire them to read on? And how is it tailored to them, to the audience? No child ever ran home from school and said, Mom, our principal and an anthropologist are going to Sacramento. No. Every kid runs home and says, Mom, there's no school on Thursday. It's getting to that nugget to be clear. Once you're clear, the data has a place to go. It's all in there again. They want to know what's in it for me and what is the one thing you want me to do, think, or feel in that email. It can be in the subject line, and it should also be in the first line of anything you write. Here's what I want you to know. And from there, as they have time, they'll go deeper in the data. But it's the same format as the spoken word. What is the one thing you want them to do? A story, tell them what's in it for them. Make sense? Great, we'll take 5 minutes. This is for the Toys for Tots drive. There's something more clear that can be there, but what was your next line?
So the recent weather events at Denver mean that without your help, customers will be compelled to reprise a starring role in this year's version of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Volunteer to support the holiday rush and be the hero that saves Turkey Day.
Now, I am not going to futz with your story because it's great. People will remember that. It's what has to come before that. The explicit.
Yeah.
Our passengers need our help to save Thanksgiving.
That's
Right. Excellent. Who was the other overtime?
I had calling all hands to save Turkey Day travelers is the headline. And then Mother Nature threw a wrench in our holiday plans, and we need your help to save the day for our stranded customers and get them home for the holidays.
I would just flip it only, so we need your help. So it's not, this is a calling all hands to save Thanksgiving. So I know right at the very beginning, you're calling me out on this. I need that. That was nice. Okay, was that all the
We
overtime?
had one more.
So, I went right to the bottom line. You have the chance to bring home more dollars for the holiday.
Oh, good money. You win. This is for employees.
Yeah. Because if we start with the WIFM, it's, well, we like to think we're all altruistic.
Kristen won that one. Round one goes to
Okay.
Kristen. So,
Thanks.
Intrinsic versus
who has
extrinsic
flying
motivation.
together down? We got two. Maria.
So I made a lot of assumptions, but my headline is benefits deadline extended by a few days. And
Okay.
And then I said, you know, we're having some trouble with flying together as a result. We've extended the benefits deadline to, 3 days later. We'll keep you posted as soon as flying together's up.
How about something that says, don't panic, you have more time for benefits?
I like it, that was my intent, right?
Yes, and well, I love what you just said here, because so often I'll hear in a session like this, that's what I meant. Well, put what you meant there. Anytime you say to yourself, what I'm trying to say is, the next words out of your mouth are exactly what belong there. Whenever what I'm trying to say is, that's where it goes. And Marcel?
Yeah, so I said, talk about bad timing, ... Flying together is down, but don't worry, open enrollment will be extended.
Okay, it was more personable, but what do you want me to know?
Flying together is down, and I don't want you to worry, I want you to feel calm that we're gonna extend the deadline.
Don't worry.
Don't worry.
We're extending the deadline.
Yeah.
Don't worry, we're extending it. So I'll see, don't worry is like, what am I supposed to be worried about? I might not have even heard about this, but I'll read on in that case. Was that it for that one? We just had the two? Profit sharing. Is that everybody else? Profit
Yeah,
sharing?
and just to this is the hardest one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one sucks, I just read it, and I was
I
like,
know.
For sure.
This is
Well,
the
give it a shot.
Guys, this is what I went with. First I wrote down, it's money sign time, okay? But it's profit sharing time. This quarter our ratio is X. Delete all the rest of it. They don't care about the Y. Next.
Will they know that it's down this year just by seeing
Yes.
the X?
Oh, yes, I would say so. I mean, I think employees follow that pretty closely. You guys tell me though, because I didn't come from a place that had
I
profit sharing
wouldn't
before.
necessarily, I mean, I don't, they would probably go with, so how's that my problem?
Right.
Right, what are you going to do to remedy that? I don't
Yeah.
know that they necessarily go directly to, oh, this means our profit sharing. So I don't know, that's my assumption. What do you think?
Why are you
Sunshine,
laughing?
ladies?
Why are you laughing? Flying together is down. Money for the holidays.
Yeah.
So what
Tighten
you
your belt and
did
take back
was,
those toys.
is the rip the Band-Aid off approach.
Yep.
And there's a place for that.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a place for rip the Band-Aid off. This is it. Now, the reasons, because imagine you went through this, we've had some things going on, some things have gone wrong, some things and I'm mad by the time I get to the end. What
Right.
are you trying to tell me?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want me mad when I hit that, you want my mind open when I hit it. So, this is your percentage. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's our chance to do better next year. But I know, what does she want me to do, think, or feel? And that think you can interchange with no. It's important for me to know that. And you don't candy coat it. It's business. It is what it is. So I don't have a problem with
Okay,
that.
thank you very much.
Was that yours too?
I got caught up in that one sentence, that's all I had, which was,
You're going to see examples of your colleagues, your coworkers, making a bad situation better for a customer. You're going to see heroics in your team. Somebody's doing something amazing. And you think, that was amazing, but you don't record it anywhere, and then you don't think of it again. Stockpile stories. When you see something really awesome happen, write it down and put it in your desk. And then when you have a really important presentation, conversation, or an email that you need to write, and you need that for instance, bring that in. So you can say, imagine you were that coworker who needed this help. Imagine you were that customer who was delighted by the conversation they had. When you see those moments, write them down and bring them into your conversation. All right, 5 minutes. You're going to stand with your partner and talk about how great United Voice is. I want to bring a couple of you up just to reenact it here, and I promised I'd get you out at 11:30. So that may be the next one. I don't want you turning on me because it's going to be like 11:31 in 5 minutes. What, as an observer, I saw that just, it warmed my heart, is not only the person speaking was animated and telling a story and talking about something that meant something. The person listening invariably was reflecting that back. I saw the speaker smiling, and the person, even though you're paying attention to making sure they stay in the frame, you're smiling back. Because you're being told a story from an authentic place, and it changes the whole game. When you're speaking about something that matters to you, it helps connect it to the person it's supposed to matter for. How was that different than the first one? And on the first one, it's like the first pancake. You didn't know what you were doing. It was just a speak off the top of your head. So it was sloppy, but there were some fundamentally different things between the first and the second. What were they?
We had a different framework for crafting what we were going to say.
And the freedom to be authentic in it. Anything else?
And reminding us the power of storytelling. You know, a lot of us probably have intuitively know that, but it helps to be reminded how you work that into your communication every day.
Jim, it's since the caveman. The
Yeah.
only way you could get a message to the other cave
That's right.
was to tell a good story. It was the internet of caveman. It's telling a story to get it to someone else who can repeat and remember it. And if you don't want your story repeated and remembered, maybe you don't have the right story there. Any other takeaways for you?
I think we were intentional and deliberate in our delivery.